Menopause is a natural biological process that marks the end of a woman's reproductive years, and the years leading up to it can be quite challenging for many of us women. Today, we will address how nutrition can support us as women during this period, and we'll also address some questions and concerns that you may have as a woman, of the question that maybe it's of our minds of our women, and that's with regards to weight gain.
Correct.
So, one thing that was called out is that during menopause, this is something that we really need to wrestle with, because it appears that, weight gain just pops up from somewhere and just decides to merge itself with us as women. So I'm just wondering, like, why does this happen? And how can we as women manage it? Knowing, obviously, we are made up of different body sizes, different compositions. And interestingly, some do get weight, some don't get weight, and then some it's just like an overflow. So how can you help us with varying degrees of body proportions and situations? How can you help us understand why this happens? Doesn't happen to some people, it happens to some people, or is it just everybody? And how do we manage it as women?
All right. So, to start, as we said in the beginning, with menopause, due to these hormonal changes that happen naturally, they will lead to a slower metabolism, and we will have a higher tendency to store fat around the abdominal area. Now, if you see, it really also depends on the lifestyle of some people that are not seeing this increment, let's say significantly around their abdominal area. It could be due to their, lifestyle, eating habits. But again, it's inevitable that with age, we will have that decreased muscle mass. And that's why with some people, they tell me that I haven't changed my eating habits yet. I'm starting to gain weight, and hormonal changes are causing that weight gain to be around the abdominal area. So we said that this is naturally going to happen, but we're forgetting the part that with this decreased muscle mass, that leads actually our bodies to it causes it to become harder to burn these calories if we are not more attentive to the quantities that we consume, and we're not doing any movement. Therefore, we are burning lower amount of calories per day. Food eating habits haven't changed. At the same time, we are actually not moving at all. So we already have lower muscle mass. So all this is causing us to gain weight because intake hasn't changed and we're not moving. Because some cultures, they're like, try, don't go for a lot of workouts in case you might hurt yourself or break, fall, cause yourself to break your hip, but this is actually wrong. Women have to really to minimize weight gain as much as possible, to focus first on strength training exercises. It's extremely important, and it's a fundamental advice that women should get more active, of course, according to their physical ability, but not sit and feel like I am worried that I might hurt myself or break a bone, or because some cultures have this perception that it might happen, so let's stay safe. We need to actually do strength training. We need to improve our muscle mass. We need to improve our bones, because strength training is extremely important, especially during this phase. Cardio workouts are good, but even brisk walking is considered to be an activity. But strength training is extremely important. Not skipping meals. I think this is also another important point, to keep our eating smaller and nutrient dense meals. So here we are talking about quality versus quantity. If you have a nutrient dense meal that's packed with vitamins, minerals, all the essential elements, then even if the quantity is not big enough, at least you are ensuring that you are within a calorie, let's say, frame, or not exceeding big calorie intake, but at the same time that you have very good quality when it comes to your food choices. And along with that, to ensure that you're limiting the added sugars and the processed foods, because all this will actually add to the weight, because we call them, high calorie foods, especially those that have a lot of fat, and they are inflammatory. And what we're trying to do is to focus more on anti-inflammatory foods. So weight gain is very common. We see this, with every woman undergoing menopause, but these recommendations will definitely help in, at least avoiding further weight gain, and perhaps it will help even in slight weight loss, because again, we don't want to have like a severe or a sudden, quick weight loss, because that's not also good for our overall health. And making sure that we are well hydrated, because sometimes dehydration can be mistaken for hunger. So again, this is very important to be well hydrated, because it also helps in reducing the feeling of the hot flashes.
Well, thank you. That's quite a lot that you've shared again. So I think we are going back to the smaller portions conversation again. We're going back to try and eat smaller. I like the word you used, or maybe the point you raised about not skipping meals. Because I mean that's probably another conversation, but some people like maybe I skip this meal and then maybe that also drives the craving to eat more. But
Correct.
if you don't skip meals, maybe you feel less hungry and more full. So that's helpful. And then limiting sugars or processed food. So we should try to cook from organically at least, or cook from things that we know, and stop eating maybe tinned or canned foods. If we can really try to avoid that, that's something that we need to take note of. And then drinking water. So interestingly, you're saying, I mean, or we're learning from you, that if we don't drink enough water, we might we might feel hungry, but it's not necessarily hunger. It's more like the body is thirsty, and then you're feeding it instead of giving it water. So that's very helpful to know. So thank you so much for sharing. I think that's for me, the skipping the meals. It's important to
and
take that
and to
into
add to
consideration.
this, yeah, and to add to this, when you're skipping your meals, then you are not again fulfilling your requirements for the day, when it comes again to calcium and all your other needs. And this is where it is quite important to really take your meals to ensure a comprehensive intake of the minerals, vitamins, etc.
Yeah, to we're trying to be smart, but indirectly we're not doing smart things. So, but anyway, like we said, now we know, so we know better. I'm just going to go back a bit to the hot flashes. And I know maybe for some women that may be listening in, they might not particularly be sure what that means. But obviously, just to clarify, hot flashes, they rise in body temperature for women that are undergoing menopause, or, they're premenopausal, and they may be experiencing these symptoms. So it's an intense heat, or sweat on the face, the neck, chest, or the skin. And you've told us about regulating by drinking a lot of water. And I think you've also shared with us that we need to avoid spicy foods, caffeine, and limit, our drinking of alcohol. So that goes without saying. So thank you so much, Sally, for just helping us understand that, there's simple things we really can do without being expensive and over the top. So I'm just going to move on to my next question. And, I, for one, like to be practical, right? So we've said all this stuff. We've talked about nutrients. We've talked about calcium, vitamin D, what have you. But what are the practical tips? Like, give us some practical tips that women can implement today, if possible, to support their health during menopause. So what does that look like?
All right. So this tip is one of my favorite tips, and I always like to recommend it, in all different age groups, which is meal prepping. I think meal prepping really, if let's say planned and implemented, will save a lot of time when it comes to eating our meals, And this also is applicable for busy professionals. Everyone who will be working away from home will need to, or even at home, it's important to meal prep, because with our busy lifestyle we tend to grab and go and find anything just to satisfy our hunger, or just to eat a meal and continue for the rest of the day. When we meal prep and we invest, let's say, an hour, or let's say 2 hours every 3 days, preparing our meals in batches, especially when it comes to cutting fruits and vegetables, preparing our proteins, then we are able to prepare our nutrient dense foods. Whether, one of the things that I like to always recommend, salad in a jar, or the mason jar salads, where you actually include all your nutrient dense foods packed with vitamins, minerals, proteins, carbs. Everything is there. You prepare it in advance, and this way you avoid depend or relying on all the processed foods. Because I mean, we've all encountered busy lives in the sense that we don't have time to prepare and cut vegetables and wash them, etc. So putting or investing in meal prepping, let's say 2 hours for the next 3 days, is amazing. And I'm sure that once implemented, it will be very much appreciated, that it's not as difficult as it seems. Because I always get the feedback, I don't have time. But it doesn't really need that much time. And that's why I always say, the first time it's going to be difficult implementing it. But when you know that you're doing this for the next 3 days or 4 days, let's say, then you will consider that, yes, why not? I mean, I can do it. So I think meal prepping is something very, very important, and being active as much as we can, meaning that going for our daily walks. Again, we always advise on a 30-minute walk on daily basis. Of course, that would be great, especially, for example, nowadays in Dubai, the weather is great, or wherever you are in the world, just try to incorporate your 30 minutes, because it will help improve your mood. And I think mood is, everybody wants to be in a good mood, right? So that's going to be helpful in the sense of improving our mood, managing our stress, reducing our anxiety, supporting weight management. Again, this is a very important, and bone health, not to forget that. Again, when it comes to bone health, that's very important. And the third point I would like to add is to listen to our body cues. So we all react to our food choices in a different way. So, and we can't, it's not a one size fits all. We need to know what are the eating habits and the food choices that make us feel better. We spoke about, let's, for example, spicy foods and hot flashes. Some women tell me that we didn't see any difference. We haven't had any spicy food and we still get the hot flashes. So again, some foods are triggers, others are not. But what we need to know is, we need to do what's best for us, because we're the ones who are going to undergo all these symptoms, all these phases. So just ensuring that we do everything in the right way will at least, make sure that we're feeling better, and it will improve our overall health and well-being.
Oh, thank you so much. So meal prep. So, most times, yeah, you're correct. I don't have time. I don't have time. But if you look at it from a long-term perspective, if you have time to do it now, then you save time. So you don't need to do it later. And more importantly, you manage eating unhealthy. So I think that's one thing that we can take home, to plan our meals in advance, and make sure that we're planning healthy meals as much as we can. And you've talked about moving daily, so these are things we can do. And I heard you say 30 minutes walk. That's something that we can incorporate. That's practical, that's doable. We should try to make sure at the most that we do that. And listening to your body, that's interesting. I think you've called that everybody's menopausal journey is different.
Different, correct.
And for one woman, may not necessarily work for another woman. That's why I said we love to compare notes, which is good, but not necessarily applicable to everyone. So I think listening to our body is something I think I want to take home from what you said, and
Yeah.
just to be a bit more mindful about what we're eating, how does that make us feel, and maybe the habits that we are incorporating. So thank you so much, Sally, for sharing such valuable insights with us. So I'm moving on to my next question, and it's about the success stories. And Sally, we love to hear success stories, because I think it just, it rubs us off in a good way to understand, from maybe one or two of your clients, maybe that are approaching menopause or maybe are going through menopause, so we can kind of connect and relate. If you could share with us like real life examples of how these women have been able to manage or deal with it. And I know there could be an impact on their mental health as well. So could you share with us maybe from your client experiences, like what has that been like? And maybe that's something we can lean on and maybe try and just have some perspective, and move on with whatever tips we can learn from what you will be sharing.
All right. Okay. Actually, I have one very nice, let's say, real life example of one of my clients. She came to me after having her second child. She was 36. And after her delivery, of course, she had gained weight during her pregnancy. And we were working with her to lose the weight post delivery, and everything was great. She was losing weight slowly. And then after she lost a significant amount of weight, I didn't see her for quite some time. And then she came up to me and at the age of around 39, she told me that I'm starting to, gain weight, although I'm still eating healthy, exercising. And then, she went for her doctor's visits. Everything seemed, somehow fine. She lost a little bit of weight, but she wasn't very satisfied. And then moving forward, I happened to see her last year, and it was a bit shocking for me to know that that phase that I didn't see her after she had lost the weight at 39, she had actually she went through menopause at the age of 41. And to her, that was a very, very big shock because her mom she was in her, she, went through her menopause at the age of 48. So it was a bit alarming and definitely not expected that she actually was in her menopause at 41. So to talk about the mental impact that it had on her, I think that was the one that we had to work around a lot because um, it went through with this, mental shock, I would say that, and physiological, of course, change that happened. She became an emotional eater. She gained weight, and already she was starting to gain weight, but didn't have the explanation to it. And then what we had to do was to, put the puzzle back together and tell her that it is unfortunate that this happened. And I know there is a lot of talks about hormone replacement therapy, but of course I'm not in a position to talk about this. But anyways, moving forward, we had to work around the 12 kilograms that she had gained in a span of 3 months, which was quite you know let's say depressing for her. So what we had to do is to encourage a lot of self-talk, a balanced plan, a lot of exercise, and a lot of Pilates, because now we are talking about the need for weight-bearing exercises. We were focused on including a good amount of calcium because she's still very young, and she has her son is what, 5 or 6, around that age. So we needed to ensure that she's growing and she's aging. I mean, I would say aging, not growing, aging in the way that she's still fit enough to, live with her kids and not feel all the body aches, the, symptoms of osteoporosis. And we actually succeeded in losing around 9 to 10 kilograms of this weight. Of course, it took a lot of ups and downs and mood swings, and all this was part of um, the journey. But with all the recommendations that I mentioned, and her being, I think, um, determined and focused that it happened. I'm not the first one that this has happened too early. And to be very honest with you, nowadays we do see it's rare. Okay, I'm not going to say it's common. It's not that common. Women having their menopause at 38, 39. So we do see this. It's not like impossible to see. We do see this. So it took some time to accept this, but just now we had to move forward, lose the weight, work on our exercise. And she was really determined that I'm not going to let this stop me and feel that I have aged. My kids are still very young. I need to work on this. And we succeeded. And now she's great. She's even, in all these women empowering groups where she tells, she's always focused on, you know, do it. You can do it. I went through it. So it's good. I've known her like for now almost 6 7 years. So I was happy that she got out of it, and life goes on. We work around what has come, and everything's fine now.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I think it's very relatable because as women, I mean, we feel like when maybe I'm speaking for everybody, but generally I can imagine still having young kids and suddenly you discover that you're menopausal, and
Mhm.
it suddenly kind of rings the bell that you're aging, you're getting old. um and in a way you kind of lose that appeal, that sex appeal, that like beautiful, and then degenerated. But that's not true. It's what I'm hearing you say, and it is a sort of encouragement to some of our ladies listening on the call. The fact that we're approaching menopause or we're menopausal does not mean we're losing our appeal, and shouldn't mean that we're losing the beauty that we have. And I think it's helpful that you share that story, to maybe encourage us to focus on, now that I have this situation, what do I need to do about it? So working with her to get back on the right weight plan, meal plan, and all that, to be able to focus on what truly matters. I think that's truly very empowering. And so thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's probably a wake up call also for us as women to take our health very seriously in terms
Correct.
of our screening and checks, right? So we need to pay attention more to doing that if we've not been doing that. Because maybe if she had been doing that, then maybe some blood tests may have deduced, or the doctor may have picked up something somehow, somewhere, and that may have been helpful. So I think for us listening to that story, it comes in an empowering way, and maybe also a learning for us to take our health more seriously. And the fact that we're going through these changes, it's only normal. It's a gradual progression. It's natural. It's biology. It must happen. But knowing
Correct.
what to do, yeah, it's really very, very helpful. So I think you've touched on most stuff that we kind of were looking at, connecting the dots today. And maybe what I would leave you with on a final note would be, what advice do you have for women on the call today that are listening to you? What advice would you have for them? What would you say to that woman that maybe is fearful of the menopausal journey, or maybe is going through the menopausal journey and is really struggling and finding it difficult to connect or relate with? What would you say to that woman on our podcast call for today? I mean, based on your experience as a dietitian, what would you say to our women listening?
All right. So, I mean, having spoke about all the symptoms and all the health risks that are accompanied with menopause, and what are the nutritional guidelines, I have to add that, or maybe summarize to say that we're all going to go and pass through this journey. What's very important is to focus on the pillars that will help us, um, manage our eating habits or even manage our symptoms, I would say, because it's inevitable. We're going to reach to that stage. So, what I always recommend is that make sure that you're always well hydrated because with the symptoms that we mentioned, the hot flashes, the mood swings, the night sweats, sleep disturbances, even reduced bone density, vaginal dryness, all these change in body compositions and all the increased risk of chronic diseases. It's always important to try to manage all these factors. And some women might be listening to us probably didn't undergo except one of these symptoms, and others probably have undergone all of them. So that's why, whatever is the symptom that you have felt, one or more, just always make sure to be very well hydrated because with the night sweats and the hot flashes, your body will need to be well hydrated. And one tip that I would like to give is to avoid the long hot showers, and make sure that we always moisturize whenever our skin is still damp, to lock the moisture in our body, to include the whole foods because we need to focus on nutrient dense foods rather than processed foods. Portion control, again, we go back to the portion control tip that I always like to give. I believe in moderation because moderation is key, and just be mindful about portion sizes. We can't be 100% perfect. We all have our cravings here and there, but even when we do so, let it be a small quantity rather than overdoing our portions. Exercising, I think this is the golden tip that I want everyone to try and implement, whether it's as I said, weight bearing exercises, cardio, any type of activity. It will improve, one, of course, bone health, but not to forget also mental health and our overall well-being. And I think, having said all that, it's important that we don't overwhelm ourselves with the all or nothing approach. We can try to implement all these gradually because already our body is undergoing a lot of physiological changes. We can just, if we can do that, great. But hydrating is something that we always need to do, whether we are in menopause or not. Good eating habits. I mean, all these recommendations, honestly, they are not only focused to this stage itself. This is the general overall health and well-being, but we need to be a little bit more attentive to our quality of food to ensure that we have a good calcium, vitamin D intake, a lot of the minerals and the omega-3 rich foods, so that we avoid or reduce the risk of having osteoporosis, which could be unfortunate if God forbid anyone would fall. It would be a bit um, unfortunate. So that's why proper nutrition during menopause is extremely essential to manage the symptoms, maintain the health, and really improve the quality of life.
Thank you. I mean, you've said it over and over again. We can't but stop emphasizing on, the diet recommendations that you've just called out, and it's really helpful when it comes to us women in the menopausal period because it helps alleviate the symptoms. And it's helpful to call out those symptoms and how you've connected that nicely to the diet. It goes a long way to justify. That's why we need balanced nutrition, right? Because it plays a huge role in our overall well-being. So I probably would just want to re-emphasize for our listeners that I think, having the constant healthcare checks, I think is really very important as we're either approaching this age of menopause or maybe we're going through it. So I think it's important that we do our checks regularly. And obviously, we have Sally as a registered dietitian on our call today, and just emphasizing how important it is for us to create a personalized meal plan that is tailored to our needs. So we obviously need a professional health dietitian to do that. So I think it's helpful to just call that out, that that would really be a game changer for those of us that are really keen on tailoring the meal plan to our body type or needs. So thank you so much, Sally, for coming again on our podcast to talk about nutrition in connection to this very important topic of menopause.
Thank you very much, Fumike. As always, it's a pleasure discussing all these, important, let's say, recommendations for such an important topic. And I hope it really transforms the lives of the women on the podcast for good, because, I believe that we can really manage and improve our overall well-being with our lifestyle and our eating habits.
Yeah, that's so true. For sure, it's transforming me, and I'm sure it's doing the same for our listeners today on our podcast. So, dear ladies, please remember that menopause is a natural part of our lives. But with the right nutrition and lifestyle adjustments, believe that we can navigate it confidently. So, once again, thank you for tuning in to our podcast episode for today. I hope it has been extremely helpful. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends, your sisters, your daughters, even your husbands and fathers. I think the more they understand the biological progression, the better they get to be able to understand our moods and what we're going through, and maybe the better our relationships as well with family. So do please keep listening to the Help We Need podcast. Stay tuned in for more episodes on living your best lives. Until next time, stay empowered and remember to empower her.